The champagne flute shattered against Zoraya's temple before she could process the movement. She went down hard, her pregnant belly twisting as she tried to protect it, her knees hitting the polished marble floor of Grandview Mall with a crack that echoed through the atrium. Christmas lights blurred above her, red and gold smearing into a kaleidoscope of pain as something warm trickled down her face. Blood or champagne? She couldn't tell. Around her, the holiday crowd froze, their shopping bags dangling like forgotten ornaments as they stared at the pregnant black woman sprawling on the ground, her royal blue dress riding up her thighs, her natural hair escaping its careful twist. "That's what happens when trash tries to upgrade," Andrew Wellington sneered above her, his voice carrying across the marble like a judge delivering a sentence. He looked different now. Designer suit, new watch, new fiancé clutching his arm with manicured nails that had never scrubbed floors or counted coins for bus fare. "Did you really think I wouldn't see you? Did you think you could just walk around my mall, flaunting that bastard in your belly, pretending you're somebody?" Zoraya's hands instinctively wrapped around her stomach, protecting the life inside her. 7 months. She was 7 months pregnant, alone, and the man who'd promised her forever was now standing over her like she was gum on his shoe. The humiliation burned hotter than the cut on her face. She tried to push herself up, but her arms shook, her body betraying her. "Stay down," Andrew hissed, his shoe coming dangerously close to her ribs. "That's where people like you belong," the crowd whispered. Phones appeared. Someone was definitely recording this. Zoraya's vision swam, panic clawing up her throat because she couldn't let him hurt her baby. She couldn't let this moment define her. She couldn't. Her phone. She'd been clutching it since the moment she'd spotted Andrew across the mall 30 minutes ago, her instincts screaming danger. Her fingers had moved on autopilot, then muscle memory from weeks of anxiety and late-night paranoia. She'd programmed one number for emergencies, one number she'd sworn she'd never use because using it would mean admitting she'd made a catastrophic mistake 6 months ago. Her thumb had found the contact labeled, "Do not call." The phone barely rang once. She'd saved his number 6 months ago under "Do not call," a reminder to herself, a boundary she'd sworn never to cross. But desperation had overridden pride. "Zoraya." The voice that answered wasn't a question. It was a statement, low and controlled, with an edge that could cut glass. Park Dong-wook didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't ask where she was. The silence on the other end of the line was the kind that precedes earthquakes. "I'm at Grandview Mall," she whispered, her voice cracking. The line went dead. For exactly 47 seconds, nothing happened. Andrew was still ranting. His fiancée was recording. The crowd was whispering. And Zoraya was still on the ground, cradling her belly and bleeding onto marble that reflected 10,000 Christmas lights. Then the air changed. It started as a murmur from the east entrance, a ripple of confusion that spread through the holiday shoppers like a wave, the sound of footsteps, synchronized and deliberate, moving through the mall with the inevitability of a storm front. Zoraya looked up, her vision clearing just enough to see them. 6 men in black suits, no security badges, no mall uniforms, just tailored darkness cutting through the festive chaos like knives through silk. And at the center of them, walking with the kind of calm that made predators look away, was Park Dong-wook. He was exactly as she remembered. Tall, lean, with a face that belonged on currency, or wanted posters, depending on who you asked. His dark hair was pushed back from his forehead, revealing sharp cheekbones and eyes that didn't blink, didn't waver, didn't register the crowd or the Christmas decorations, or anything except the woman on the ground and the man standing over her. Andrew didn't notice at first. He was too busy enjoying his moment, too drunk on power and champagne and the validation of his new money circle. But his fiancée noticed. Her phone lowered, her face went pale. "Andrew," she whispered, tugging his sleeve. "Andrew, we should go. Why would we?" Andrew turned, and the words died in his throat. Dong-wook stopped 3 feet away from them. He didn't speak, didn't need to. His presence alone sucked the oxygen from the space, turned the festive mall into a vacuum where only his will existed. One of his men moved forward, a silent question in his stance, but Dong-wook raised one hand. "Stop, not yet." His eyes finally left Andrew and dropped to Zoraya. The shift in his expression was microscopic, a crack in marble, but she saw it. Concern, fury, something else she couldn't name because she'd spent 6 months running from it. "Can you stand?" he asked her, his voice soft in a way that made the question feel like an offering, not a command. Zoraya nodded, not trusting her voice. She tried to push herself up again, and this time, Dong-wook moved. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hand extending toward her with a gentleness that contradicted everything about the violence coiled in his shoulders. She took it, his fingers wrapped around hers, warm and steady, and he lifted her to her feet like she weighed nothing. "I've got you," he murmured, his other hand hovering near her back but not touching, giving her space to find her balance. "I've always got you. Welcome to Ruthless Romance Tales, and honey, you just stepped into something you can't unsee. If you've been riding with me, you know we don't do safe here, we do dangerous. We do addictive. We do the kind of love that brands your soul and refuses to let go. And if you're new, buckle the hell up, because what you're about to witness is a collision so violent, so inevitable, it'll rewrite everything you thought you knew about romance. Hit that like button like your life depends on it. Subscribe because you're already hooked. And smash that notification bell, because missing what comes next would be a crime. Now let's watch how the ruthless Dawn's life changed forever." Andrew finally found his voice, but it came out wrong, strangled with confusion and the first threads of fear. "Who the hell are you?" Dong-wook didn't look at him. He was too busy checking Zaraya's face, his thumb brushing near the cut on her temple with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "You're bleeding." "I'm fine," she whispered, but her hands were shaking. "You're not fine." His jaw tightened, that microscopic crack in his composure widening into something dangerous. "Who did this?" Zaraya didn't answer. Didn't have to. Dong-wook's gaze finally slid to Andrew, and the temperature in the mall dropped 10 degrees. "You touched her," Dong-wook said. It wasn't a question. Andrew laughed, a nervous, brittle sound that echoed wrong in the silence. "Listen, man, I don't know what she told you, but this is between me and my ex. This is none of your business." "Your ex." Dong-wook repeated the words like he was tasting poison. He glanced at Zaraya, something unreadable flickering across his face, then back at Andrew. "The woman carrying your child, the woman you just assaulted in public, that ex, she's a liar?" Andrew spat, emboldened by his fiancé's presence and the crowd's phones. "She probably doesn't even know who the father is. Look at her. She's nothing. She's—" Dong-wook moved. It wasn't violent. That was the terrifying part. He simply stepped forward, closing the space between himself and Andrew with the kind of measured intent that made everyone around them step back. He didn't raise his voice, didn't raise his hand. He just stood there, 6 feet of controlled danger, and looked at Andrew Wellington like he was a problem that needed erasing. "Say one more word about her," Dong-wook said quietly, "and I will buy this mall, shut it down, and make sure the only thing you ever see inside it again is the inside of a janitor's closet. After I'm done with your credit, your reputation, and every connection you think makes you untouchable." Andrew's face went white. "You can't—" "I own Grandview Mall," Dong-wook continued, his tone conversational, almost bored. "I've owned it for 3 years. I also own the parking structure you valeted your leased BMW in, the penthouse building you're renting in, and the investment firm that's currently managing your trust fund." He paused, letting that sink in. "Did you really think you were shopping in neutral territory?" The crowd had gone completely silent. Phones were still recording, but now they were recording something else entirely. The shift of power, the unmasking. Andrew's fiancé released his arm and took a step back. "Smart woman." "You're lying," Andrew said, but his voice cracked. Dong-wook pulled out his phone, tapped it twice, and held it up. On the screen was a live feed of the mall's security system. Every camera, every angle, every recording of the last 10 minutes, including Andrew throwing the champagne flute, including his rant, including everything. "I'm not lying," Dong-wook said. "I'm being patient, but my patience ends the moment you stop being useful to me as a lesson." He lowered the phone and finally looked at Zaraya again, his expression softening in a way that made her heart stutter. "We're leaving. My car is downstairs." "I don't." Zaraya started, but he shook his head. "We'll talk in the car," he said gently. "Right now, I need to get you somewhere safe. Please." She should have argued, should have demanded answers, should have done 100 things that made sense, but standing there in her torn dress, bleeding and pregnant and exhausted, with Andrew's hatred burning behind her and Dong-wook's protection surrounding her, Zaraya made a choice. She nodded. Dong-wook's hand settled on the small of her back, a whisper of touch that somehow grounded her entire world, and he guided her toward the exit. His men fell into formation around them, a moving wall of silence and threat, and as they walked past Andrew, Dong-wook paused. "If you ever come near her again," he said, his voice dropping into something subterranean and final, "I won't call my lawyers. I'll call my brothers. And trust me, Andrew Wellington, You don't want to meet my brothers." They left him standing there, surrounded by phones and whispers and the shattered remains of his power trip. The Maybach was waiting at the private garage entrance, black and sleek and humming with quiet power. Dong-wook opened the door himself, helped Zaraya inside, and slid in beside her. The door closed, sealing them in leather and silence, and the faint scent of rain on glass. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Dong-wook reached over, his hand covering hers where it still rested protectively on her belly. "Are you hurt? The baby?" "We're okay," Zaraya whispered, but tears were sliding down her face now, hot and unstoppable. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called you. I just didn't know who else." "Stop." His thumb traced circles on her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it broke something inside her. "You did exactly what you should have done. You called me." "But I left," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush of guilt and fear and relief. "6 months ago, I walked out of your office and disappeared because I was terrified of what you are, what you do, and I swore I'd never drag you into my mess. And now—" "Zaraya." He turned to face her fully, his other hand coming up to cup her face, his thumb carefully avoiding the cut on her temple. "You didn't drag me into anything. I've been in your mess since the day you brought me tea without being asked. Since the day you smiled at me like I was human instead of a monster. Since the day you left and I realized I'd let the only good thing in my life walk away because I was too afraid to tell you the truth." She stared at him, her breath catching. "What truth?" Dong-wook's eyes held hers, dark and endless and full of something that looked dangerously close to devotion. "That I've been watching you since the day you disappeared. That I've had men stationed near your apartment for months, making sure you were safe, making sure Andrew stayed away, making sure no one touched you. That I've been waiting for you to call me, to need me, to give me one single reason to step back into your life." His voice dropped to a whisper. "You didn't text the wrong number, Zaraya. You finally gave me permission to do what I've wanted to do since the moment you left." The car started moving, gliding through Seoul's streets like a shadow, and Zaraya felt the world tilt sideways, because she'd spent 6 months running from Park Dong-wook, from his world, from the terrifying realization that she'd fallen in love with a man whose name made criminals cross the street. And he'd spent 6 months waiting for her to come home. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice small. "My penthouse," he said. "I have a doctor waiting. Then we're going to talk about everything. About Andrew, about the baby, about why you ran, and about why I'm never letting you run again." He paused, his hand still cradling her face. "Is that okay?" Zaraya looked at him, at the man who'd just dismantled her ex-fiancé with 6 sentences and a phone call. The man who'd been protecting her from the shadows for half a year. The man whose touch made her feel safer than she'd felt in months. "Okay," she whispered. And as the Maybach carried them through the glittering Seoul night, Zaraya realized that walking into Grandview Mall that afternoon had been the second biggest mistake of her life. The first had been walking away from Park Dong-wook, but maybe, just maybe, she'd been given a second chance to fix it. The penthouse elevator moved in silence, the kind that pressed against eardrums and made breathing feel deliberate. Zaraya stood with her back against the mirrored wall, watching Dong-wook's reflection watch her. He hadn't let go of her hand since they'd left the car. His thumb still traced those slow, hypnotic circles against her knuckles, a gesture that should have been comforting but felt like something else entirely. Like a claim, like a promise he hadn't yet spoken aloud. The numbers climbed. 47th floor, 48th, 49th. "You're shaking," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers in the mirror. "I'm fine." "You keep saying that." His voice dropped lower, intimate in the enclosed space. "You're not fine, Zaraya. You haven't been fine since you left me." The elevator doors opened before she could respond, revealing a penthouse that looked less like a home and more like a fortress dressed in glass and steel. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul's glittering sprawl, the city lights reflecting off rain-slicked streets below. But Zaraya barely registered the view. She was too focused on the man waiting in the living room, older, silver-haired, with a medical bag at his feet. "Dr. Kang," Dong-wook said, his hand still holding hers. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." The doctor's eyes flicked to Zaraya's temple, then to her belly, then back to Dong-wook with an expression that said he'd seen this exact scene play out before. "Let's get her comfortable." Dong-wook guided her to the sofa, his movements careful, deliberate, like she was porcelain that might shatter if he pressed too hard. He knelt in front of her as doctor. Kang opened his bag, and for a moment, the underground king of Seoul looked like nothing more than a man terrified of losing something precious. "The baby first," Zaraya whispered. "I know." His hand settled on her knee, steady and warm. "I know, Zaraya. Dr. Kang worked efficiently, the Doppler pressed against her belly, filling the room with the rapid-fire heartbeat of her child. Zariah's eyes closed, relief flooding through her so intensely she felt dizzy. Alive. The baby was alive. Strong heartbeat, Dr. Kang confirmed. No signs of distress. But you need to rest. Stress like this won't happen again. Dong-wook interrupted, his voice absolute. I'll make sure of it. The doctor cleaned the cut on her temple next, butterfly bandages pulling the skin closed with a sting that made Zariah flinch. Dong-wook's hand tightened on her knee, his jaw working like he was physically restraining himself from doing something violent. When Dr. Kang finally packed his bag and left with a quiet warning about bed rest, the silence that followed felt heavier than before. Dong-wook stood, walked to the windows, his hands sliding into his pockets. The city sprawled behind him like a kingdom he'd conquered through blood and strategy, but he looked at it like it meant nothing. Like the only thing that mattered was the woman sitting on his sofa, pregnant and bleeding and still refusing to look at him directly. Why did you run? He asked finally, Zariah's hands twisted in her lap. You know why. Say it anyway. Because you terrify me. The words came out raw, honest, because 6 months ago, I walked into your office to temp for 3 weeks, and I left knowing that if I stayed, I'd fall so deeply into you I'd never find my way out. Because I saw what you are, Dong-wook. I saw the men who bow when you walk into rooms. I saw the way people's voices drop when they say your name. I saw the gun in your desk drawer and the blood on your knuckles after that meeting you thought I didn't notice. She finally looked at him, her eyes burning. I saw you, and I knew if I let myself love you, it would ruin me. And Andrew, his voice was lethal. Did he ruin you? Andrew was safe. She laughed bitterly. Or so I thought. Andrew was normal. He had a normal job and normal friends and a normal future planned. He didn't make me feel like I was standing at the edge of a cliff every time he touched me. But he left you. Dong-wook turned from the window, his eyes dark and unreadable. He left you pregnant and alone, and I'm willing to bet he didn't do it kindly. Zariah's throat tightened. She didn't want to remember that night. The way Andrew had looked at her pregnancy test like it was a death sentence. The way he'd packed his bags while she begged him to stay. The way he'd walked out without looking back. He said I trapped him, she whispered. He said I got pregnant on purpose to lock him down, and he wasn't about to let some ghetto girl ruin his life. The temperature in the room dropped. Dong-wook's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went cold and distant, the kind of cold that preceded very bad decisions for very bad people. And you believed him, he said softly. No, but I believed that I deserved it. She stood, her hands wrapping around her belly protectively. Because I did trap him, Dong-wook. Not with the baby that was an accident, but I trapped him by pretending to be someone I wasn't. Someone simple and easy and undemanding. Someone who didn't wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about a man whose touch felt like falling and flying at the same time. You were thinking about me. Not a question, a revelation. Every night, she admitted, and the confession felt like stepping off that cliff she'd been avoiding. Every single night, I was with Andrew and thinking about you. And when he left, I told myself it was karma, that I'd destroyed my own life by wanting something I had no right to want. Dong-wook closed the distance between them in 3 strides. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You had every right, he said, his voice rough. You had every right to want me, Zariah, because I've wanted you since the first day you walked into my office and didn't flinch when you saw the tattoos on my hands. Since the first time you smiled at me like I was worth smiling at. Since the first time you brought me tea and remembered I don't take sugar without me telling you. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with a gentleness that made her breath catch. I let you walk away because I thought I was protecting you, because men like me don't get to keep things as good as you. But I was wrong, Dong-wook. I should have chased you, he continued, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. I should have torn this city apart looking for you. I should have told you the truth 6 months ago instead of watching you leave because I was too afraid you'd see me for what I really am and run anyway. What truth? Her voice was barely a whisper. His eyes held hers, dark and endless, and full of something that looked like surrender. That I'm in love with you. That I've been in love with you since the moment you laughed at my terrible joke about tax evasion and didn't ask if I was serious. That every woman I've met since you left has been a shadow of you. And I'm done pretending I can live in a world where you don't belong to me. The words hung between them, heavy and irrevocable. Zariah's heart slammed against her ribs. You don't know me. Not really. I know you take your coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar. I know you hum when you're concentrating. I know you're terrified of thunderstorms, but you'll stand in the rain anyway because you're stubborn. I know you left me because you were scared, not because you didn't feel it too. His other hand came up, framing her face, holding her like she was the only thing in the world worth holding. And I know that baby you're carrying deserves a father who'll burn the world down to keep him safe. Let me be that, Zariah. Let me be everything Andrew wasn't. The baby isn't yours, she said. But her hands were on his chest now, feeling his heartbeat thunder beneath her palms. I don't care. His forehead touched hers, his breath warm against her lips. That baby is yours, which means he's already mine in every way that matters. Let me prove it. Andrew walked away from his own child. That makes him a sperm donor, not a father. But if you'll let me, I'll be the father that baby deserves. Zariah closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks, and for the first time in 6 months, she let herself fall. The guest bedroom was too perfect. That was Zariah's first thought as Dong-wook opened the door, revealing a space decorated in soft grays and cream, untouched and waiting like it had been prepared specifically for her. A silk robe lay across the bed. Fresh towels sat folded on the dresser. The bathroom light was already on, steam rising from what she suspected was a bath drawn at the exact temperature she preferred. How long have you been planning this? She asked, her voice sharper than intended. Dong-wook leaned against the doorframe, his jacket discarded somewhere between the living room and here, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms marked with ink that told stories she'd never asked him to explain. Planning what? This. She gestured at the room, at the robe, at the evidence of his preparation. You have a guest room ready for a pregnant woman you haven't seen in 6 months. You had a doctor on standby. You knew exactly what I needed before I even walked through your door. I hoped, he corrected quietly. There's a difference. Is there? Zariah turned to face him fully, exhaustion making her reckless. Because, from where I'm standing, this looks like a man who's been waiting for me to break so he could swoop in and fix me. Like I'm some kind of project you've been working on from a distance. Something flickered across his face, hurt, maybe, or frustration, but his voice remained calm. You're not a project, Zariah. Then, what am I? The question came out raw. Because I need to understand what's happening here, Dong-wook. I need to understand why you were at that mall at the exact moment I needed you. Why you have a room prepared. Why you're looking at me like... She stopped, her throat tightening. Like what? Like you own me. The words hung between them, dangerous and true. Dong-wook pushed off the doorframe, closing the distance until he was close enough to touch but didn't. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. I don't own you, he said, each word deliberate. But I know you, Zariah. I know you well enough to know that when you're scared, you push people away. I know you well enough to know you'd never ask for help even when you're drowning. And I know you well enough to know that right now, you're looking for a reason to run again because staying terrifies you more than anything Andrew could ever do. You don't know me, she insisted, but her voice wavered. Then let me prove it. He moved past her, walking to the bathroom, and returned with something in his hand. A bottle of lotion. Cocoa butter and vanilla. The cheap kind from the drugstore that she'd been using since college because it reminded her of her grandmother. You hate expensive products. They make you feel like you're pretending to be someone you're not. You buy this brand specifically because it's what you grew up with. He set it on the dresser. You sleep on your left side, but you'll wake up on your right. You have nightmares about being trapped in small spaces, so I made sure this room has 2 exits. He gestured toward the balcony door she hadn't noticed. You don't like feeling dependent on anyone, which is why this room has everything you might need so you never have to ask. Zariah stared at him, her heart hammering. How? Because I paid attention, he said simply. Because every moment you spent in my office, I was memorizing you. The way you moved, the way you thought, the things that made you smile and the things that made you shut down. He stepped closer, and this time she didn't move away. You're not a project, Zariah. You're the woman I fell in love with, and I've spent 6 months learning how to be what you need before you even knew you needed it. That's... She struggled for words. That's insane. That's obsessive. Yes. No apology in his voice. No shame. Just brutal honesty. It is. The admission should have scared her. Should have sent her running for the nearest exit. But instead, something inside her chest cracked open, and what spilled out felt dangerously close to relief. Because Andrew had barely remembered her coffee order after 2 years together. Andrew had never noticed when she was hurting or scared. Andrew had looked at her pregnancy like an inconvenience instead of a miracle, and Dong-wook had spent half a year learning how to love her in a language she hadn't known she needed. "The bath is going to get cold," he said quietly, breaking the moment. "You should rest. We can talk more in the morning." He turned to leave, and Zariah's voice stopped him at the door. "Why were you at the mall?" His hand paused on the doorknob. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, tapping the screen before crossing back to her. He held it up, and Zariah's blood went cold. It was a text message. From her. Sent 30 minutes before Andrew had thrown that champagne flute. "Just saw him. Grandview Mall. I can't do this alone anymore. You texted me," Dong-wook said softly. "You called for help. So I came." Zariah's mind reeled. She didn't remember sending that. Didn't remember typing those words. But looking at the timestamp, looking at the raw honesty of the message, she knew it was real. Knew that some part of her, the part that had been screaming for 6 months, had finally been desperate enough to reach out. "I was already tracking your location," he admitted, and her eyes snapped to his. "I've had someone watching you since the day you disappeared, making sure you were safe, making sure Andrew stayed away, making sure that if you ever needed me, I could be there in minutes." His jaw tightened. "I know how that sounds. I know it crosses lines, but I don't care, Zariah. I will not apologize for keeping you alive. You've been stalking me." The words felt strange in her mouth, accusatory and aroused at the same time. Yes, still no apology. For 6 months, every single day. Zariah should have been furious, should have felt violated, but instead, she felt something else entirely, something dark and wanting and completely irrational. Because part of her, the part that had been sleeping with one eye open since Andrew left, the part that had been terrified every time she walked to her car alone, was relieved. Grateful, even. "Show me," she whispered. "Zariah, show me what you've been watching. Show me how deep this goes." Dong-wook's eyes darkened with something that might have been warning or hunger. He walked to the desk in the corner, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a folder. When he handed it to her, his fingers brushed hers, and the contact sent electricity up her arm. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Zariah at the grocery store, one hand on her belly, reading labels. Zariah at the library, checking out books on pregnancy. Zariah sitting in her car outside her apartment, crying after what must have been another encounter with Andrew. The last photo made her breath catch. It was taken 3 weeks ago, outside a clinic. She was standing on the sidewalk, her hand pressed against the window, staring at the ultrasound image she'd just been given, and in the reflection of that window, barely visible, was a man in a black car, watching her, protecting her, loving her in the only way he knew how. Zariah looked up at Dong-wook, and whatever he saw in her expression made him tense. "Say something." "I should be terrified of you," she said slowly. "I know. I should run. I know. But I'm not going to." She closed the folder, set it aside, and took a step toward him. "Because you're right. I've been drowning, and you're the only person who noticed." Zariah sank into the bath, the water hot enough to make her skin flush, steam rising in clouds that blurred the edges of the room. She'd left the door cracked open. Not an invitation. Exactly, but not a rejection either. A tentative offering of trust to a man who'd spent 6 months earning it in silence. Her mind drifted back to that first day at Park Industries. She'd been terrified. Walking into that glass tower with her borrowed briefcase and her carefully pressed blouse, knowing she was a temp filling in for someone important, someone permanent, someone who belonged in places like that. The office had been cold, all steel and intimidation, and the man behind the desk had been colder. Dong-wook hadn't looked up when she'd entered. He'd been reading something on his screen, his jaw tight, his fingers drumming against the desk in a rhythm that felt dangerous. And when he'd finally acknowledged her presence, his eyes had been dark and distant, assessing her like she was a problem to be solved or a threat to be neutralized. Most people would have flinched, would have stammered through their introduction and counted down the minutes until they could escape. But Zariah had seen the tattoos on his hands, intricate ink that crawled up his fingers and disappeared beneath his sleeves, and instead of fear, she'd felt curiosity. She'd smiled, introduced herself, and asked if he wanted tea. "No sugar," he'd said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Extra hot." She hadn't written it down, hadn't needed to. And when she'd returned 15 minutes later with his tea prepared exactly as he'd requested, something had shifted in his expression. Not warmth, exactly, but recognition. Like he'd just realized she was real. "How did you know?" he'd asked. Know what? That I don't take sugar. Zariah had shrugged, setting the cup on his desk. You look like someone who doesn't like things diluted. And that had been it. The moment everything changed. The moment Park Dong-wook started noticing her. A soft knock pulled her back to the present. Zariah opened her eyes to find Dong-wook standing in the doorway, his gaze carefully averted, his posture tense like he was forcing himself to maintain distance. I brought towels, he said, holding up a stack of white cotton. And I wasn't sure if you needed. Come here. His eyes met hers, questioning, cautious. Zariah, please. She shifted in the bath, the water rippling around her belly, her shoulders. I don't want to be alone right now. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Thought he'd maintain that careful, respectful distance he'd been holding since they'd entered the penthouse. But then he crossed the room, set the towels on the counter, and knelt beside the tub. Tell me what you need, he said quietly. I don't know. Her voice broke slightly. I just know I'm tired of being scared, tired of pretending I'm strong enough to do this alone. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to refuse, and settled on the edge of the tub. You are strong enough. You've been strong enough for 6 months, but you don't have to be anymore. Zariah's throat tightened. That day in your office, the day I brought you tea, do you remember what happened after? You stayed late, Dong-wook said immediately. Everyone else had gone home, but you were still organizing files. I came out of a meeting and found you singing to yourself. She laughed wetly. I thought the office was empty. It wasn't. His fingers traced the rim of the tub, not touching her but close enough to feel. I stood in the hallway for 10 minutes listening to you, and I remember thinking that I'd never heard anything that beautiful in my entire life. I was singing Aretha Franklin off-key. You were happy. His eyes held hers, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd been around someone who was genuinely happy. Everyone in my world is afraid, or ambitious, or calculating. But you were just, you. Zariah reached up, her wet fingers wrapping around his wrist. You were in the middle of something bad then, weren't you? I remember there were men in your office that week who looked at me like I was collateral damage. Dong-wook's expression darkened. There was a territorial dispute. Another organization was pushing into my territory, trying to take what was mine. It got violent. People died. His jaw tightened. I was planning my retaliation. I was going to burn everything they'd built to the ground. But you didn't. No. His thumb brushed against her pulse point. Because every morning, you'd bring me tea and smile at me like I was worth smiling at. And every evening, you'd leave a note on my desk with some ridiculous joke or a reminder to eat. And I realized that if I started that war, you'd be caught in the crossfire. His voice dropped. I couldn't let that happen. So I found another way, a quieter way, a way that kept you safe. You changed your entire strategy because of me, Zariah whispered, the realization hitting her like a wave. I changed everything because of you. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. You made me want to be someone who deserved that smile. Someone who deserved your humanity. The water had cooled slightly, raising goosebumps on her skin. Dong-wook noticed immediately, his free hand reaching for the tap to add more hot water. But Zariah caught his wrist, holding him still. Help me, she said softly. With what? My hair. She gestured to the shampoo on the ledge. I can't reach properly anymore. Something vulnerable flickered across his face. Are you sure? In answer, Zariah shifted forward, making space behind her. Dong-wook hesitated only a moment before rising, rolling up his sleeves further, and positioning himself at the head of the tub. His fingers slid into her hair, gentle and reverent, gathering the thick curls that had absorbed too much water and stress. Lean back, he murmured. She did, letting her head rest against the edge of the tub as his hands worked shampoo through her scalp. His touch was nothing like she'd expected. Not aggressive or demanding, but careful, almost worshipful, like he was memorizing the texture of her hair, the shape of her skull, the small sounds of relief she made when his fingers found the tension at her temples. This is the most intimate thing I've ever done, he admitted quietly, his voice rough. More intimate than, yes. His hands stilled. Because you're letting me see you vulnerable, letting me take care of you. That's more powerful than anything else could ever be. Zariah's eyes drifted closed as he rinsed her hair, his fingers threading through the strands with infinite patience. The moment felt suspended, fragile, like glass balanced on a cliff's edge. Then someone knocked. The spell shattered. Dong-wook's hands tensed in her hair before he carefully withdrew, water dripping from his fingers as he stood. His expression had shifted, the tenderness replaced by something cold and lethal. "Stay here," he said, his voice dropping into the tone she recognized from that first day in his office, the tone that made dangerous men step back. He left the bathroom, and Zariah heard low voices in the hallway. Urgent, angry, wrong. When Dong-wook returned, his face was carved from stone. "What is it?" she asked, sitting up despite the water sloshing over the edge. "Andrew has a lawyer," he said flatly. "An expensive one. The kind who doesn't take cases unless someone powerful is bankrolling them." Zariah's blood went cold. "Who?" "I don't know yet." His hands clenched into fists. "But whoever it is, they hate me enough to use your ex as a weapon, and they know exactly where to hit to make it hurt." Zariah found Dong-wook in his study 20 minutes later, dressed in the silk robe he'd left for her, her damp hair twisted into a knot at the nape of her neck. He stood at his desk with his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and deadly as he spoke in rapid Korean. She caught enough words to understand the conversation's direction. Names, locations, methods of persuasion that made her stomach turn even though she couldn't translate them precisely. When he saw her in the doorway, his expression flickered. He ended the call abruptly, setting the phone down like it had burned him. "You should be resting," he said, "and you should be telling me the truth." Zariah crossed the room, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. "What are you planning?" "Nothing you need to concern yourself with." "Don't." Her voice sharpened. "Don't treat me like I'm fragile. Don't treat me like I'm someone who needs to be protected from reality. I've been living in reality for 6 months, Dong-wook. I've been broke and pregnant and scared and alone. I don't need you to shield me from the ugliness of your world." His jaw tightened. "This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment Andrew threw that glass at my head." She stepped closer, close enough to see the tension coiled in his shoulders, the fury banked in his eyes. "So tell me, what are you planning to do to him?" For a long moment Dong-wook said nothing. Then he exhaled slowly, his hand dragging through his hair. "I'm going to make him disappear. Quietly, permanently, in a way that ensures whoever's backing him understands what happens when they come for what's mine." The words should have horrified her, should have sent her running for the door. But instead, Zariah felt something dark and satisfied curl in her chest. Something that had been growing since Andrew had sneered at her pregnancy, since he'd called her nothing, since he'd made her believe she deserved the abandonment. "Don't," she said quietly. Dong-wook's eyes snapped to hers. "What?" "Don't kill him. Not yet." She moved closer, her hand settling on the desk between them. "Death is mercy, Dong-wook. It's quick. It's final. It lets him escape." Her voice dropped, cold and certain. "I want him to suffer first. I want him to feel exactly what he made me feel. I want him destroyed, not dead." Something shifted in Dong-wook's expression. Not surprise, exactly. More like recognition. Like he was seeing a part of her he'd suspected existed but had never witnessed before. "Careful," he murmured. "You're starting to sound like me." "Good." Zariah held his gaze. "Because maybe I need to be more like you. Maybe I've spent too long being the woman who forgives and forgets and turns the other cheek. Maybe it's time I became the woman who takes back what's hers." Dong-wook circled the desk slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. When he reached her, he didn't touch her, but she could feel the heat radiating off his body, could smell the faint scent of his soap mixed with something darker, more primal. "What did you have in mind?" he asked. "Andrew always bragged about being smart with money, said he had investments I'd never understand, accounts in places I'd never heard of." Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "He thought I wasn't listening, thought I was too stupid or too distracted to remember. But I remember everything, Dong-wook. Every account number he mentioned, every password he used, every brag about how he was building an empire I'd never be part of." Dong-wook's expression darkened with something that looked like pride. "He stole from you, not directly, but he used my ideas, my business plan. The startup I told him about over dinner one night when I was naive enough to think we were partners." She swallowed hard. "He took it, repackaged it, and sold it to his friends as his own. Made $250,000 and never gave me a cent. Never even acknowledged where it came from. And you want it back." "I want everything back." Her voice shook with fury. "Every dollar he made off my work. Every connection he built using my labor. Every ounce of respect he stole when he made me feel like I was worthless." Dong-wook studied her for a long moment. Then he reached past her, opened his laptop, and typed something quickly before turning the screen toward her. "Then take it." Zariah stared at the screen. It showed a banking interface, blank and waiting for login credentials. You want me to steal from him? I want you to reclaim what's yours. He leaned back against the desk, his arms crossed. I can have my people do it. They're good at this kind of thing, but something tells me you need to do this yourself. He was right. She needed to feel this. Needed to watch Andrew's empire crumble under her fingertips. Needed to know that she wasn't the helpless woman he'd left crying in her car. Zariah sat down, her hands hovering over the keyboard. What if I can't remember the passwords? Then we'll find another way. Dong-wook moved behind her, his presence solid and grounding. But I think you remember. I think you've been remembering for 6 months, storing it all away, waiting for the moment you'd be brave enough to use it. Her fingers found the keys. She typed the first account number from memory, her heart hammering, then the username, then the password, a combination of his mother's maiden name and the year he graduated college, predictable and arrogant. The screen loaded. And there it was, $273,000, sitting in an offshore account under Andrew Wellington's name. Holy hell, she whispered. Is that all of it? Dong-wook's voice was calm, but she could hear the satisfaction underneath. No. Zariah's hands were shaking now. There are 3 more accounts. He showed me once when he was drunk, trying to impress me, trying to prove he was smarter than everyone else. Show me. She logged into the second account, 150,000. The third, 97,000. The fourth made her breath catch, $420,000. Most of it dated from transactions made in the last 6 months. He's been building his empire while I've been counting pennies for groceries, she said, her voice hollow. Dong-wook's hand settled on her shoulder, warm and steady. Not anymore. Transfer it, all of it, into an account he can't touch. Where? I'll give you the routing information. It's a trust I set up 6 months ago. He paused. In your name. Zariah turned to look at him. What? I told you. I've been planning for this moment. His eyes held hers. I've been planning for you to come back, for you to need help, for you to finally let me give you what you deserve. He reached past her, typing quickly. This account is yours. Only yours. He can't access it. His lawyers can't freeze it. It's protected under layers of corporate structure that would take years to untangle. You've been building me an escape route. I've been building you a future. His hand cupped her face, tilting her head back. A future where you never have to depend on men like Andrew. Where you never have to be afraid of losing everything because someone decides you're not worth keeping. Zariah's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to cry, and turned back to the screen. Her fingers moved quickly now, transferring funds with a speed that felt almost violent, watching Andrew's accounts drain, watching her own balance climb. $940,000. Almost $1 million that should have been hers from the beginning. How does it feel? Dong-wook asked quietly. Like breathing, she admitted. Like I've been suffocating for 6 months and I'm finally getting air. Good. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. Now imagine what else we could take from him. Before Zariah could answer, a notification popped up on the screen. An email, the subject line stark and threatening. You're making a mistake. She clicked it. A video file loaded, grainy but clear enough to make her blood run cold. It was footage from Grandview Mall, not from today, from 2 weeks ago. Zariah walking through the food court, one hand on her belly, her face tired and worried. And in the background, barely visible but unmistakable, was a man following her, dark suit, sunglasses, one of Dong-wook's men. The video paused, and text appeared across the screen. She's not safe with you. She was never safe. And soon, everyone will know what you really are. Dong-wook's fingers flew across his phone screen, his jaw locked tight as he forwarded the video to someone whose name Zariah couldn't see. The silence in the study felt suffocating, broken only by the sound of Seoul's rain against the windows and her own pulse hammering in her ears. They've been watching me, she said, her voice hollow. Whoever sent this has been following me just like you have. They know about your men. They know I'm here. They want you scared. Dong-wook set his phone down with controlled violence. They want you to think being with me makes you a target. They want you to run. Maybe I should. His eyes snapped to hers, dark and fierce. Don't! Someone powerful enough to fund Andrew's lawyer. Powerful enough to have me surveilled. Powerful enough to threaten you. Her breath hitched. This isn't just about revenge anymore, Dong-wook. This is war. And I'm the ammunition they're using against you. You think I don't know that? He moved closer, his hands gripping the arms of her chair, caging her in. You think I haven't calculated every risk, Every angle, every possible way this could go wrong. I knew the moment you walked into my office 6 months ago that keeping you would paint a target on your back. I knew it. And I let you walk away because I thought distance would keep you safe. His voice dropped, rough with emotion. But they found you anyway, Zaraya. They've been circling you for months, waiting for the perfect moment to use you against me, so running won't save you. The only thing that saves you now is staying close enough for me to protect you. Or they could expose what you are, she whispered. Destroy everything you've built. Use me to. Let them try. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I will burn this entire city to ash before I let anyone hurt you. Do you understand me? I will destroy everything and everyone who even thinks about touching you. The raw intensity in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, it ignited something primal in her chest, something that recognized his darkness and answered with her own. Then destroy Andrew first, she said. Not with violence, with truth. Show the world exactly who he is. Dong-wook's expression shifted, understanding dawning. You want to leak something. I want to leak everything. Zaraya pulled up Andrew's phone records on the laptop, files she'd found buried in one of his cloud accounts. He kept receipts, messages, screenshots of conversations with his friends where they laughed about me, called me his charity case, joked about how long it would take before I realized the baby wasn't worth the effort. Her hands trembled with fury. He documented his own cruelty like it was something to be proud of. Forward them to me. Dong-wook straightened, pulling out his phone again. I have contacts at 3 major news outlets and every tabloid that matters. By morning, Andrew Wellington's name will be synonymous with garbage. What about his fiancée? Zaraya asked, something vicious curling in her tone. The woman who stood there filming while he attacked a pregnant woman? What about her? She needs to know who she's marrying. Zaraya scrolled through more files, finding what she was looking for, screenshots of Andrew's dating app activity, active even after his engagement. Messages to other women, promises, lies. Send her these, directly. Let her find out exactly how faithful her perfect fiancé really is. Dong-wook's smile was sharp and approving. You're enjoying this. I'm taking back my narrative. She hit send, watching the files transfer to his phone. For 6 months, I let him control how people saw me. The poor ex-girlfriend, the gold digger who got pregnant on purpose, the woman who wasn't good enough to keep him. She stood, the silk robe sliding against her skin as she moved closer to him. But now they're going to see the truth. They're going to see who the real monster is. His hand found her waist, steadying her. And what if the truth makes them come after you harder? What if exposing him puts you in more danger? Then I'll already be in the safest place I can be. Her palm pressed against his chest, feeling his heartbeat thunder beneath her touch. Here, with you, fighting back instead of hiding. Dong-wook's phone buzzed. Once, twice, a dozen times in rapid succession. He glanced at the screen, and his expression turned predatory. It's already spreading. Someone leaked it to a gossip account with 2 million followers. Who? Does it matter? He turned the phone toward her. The screen showed Andrew's face plastered across social media. The screenshots Zaraya had provided blown up for the world to see. Comments flooded in disgust, outrage, condemnation. He's trending, and not in a good way. Zaraya watched the fallout unfold in real time, her breath coming faster. Another notification popped up, a live stream from Andrew's fiancée's Instagram account. The woman's face filled the screen, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face as she held up her phone. This is the man I was going to marry, she said, her voice shaking with rage. This is the man who told me his ex was crazy, that she trapped him, that he was the victim. She swiped through screenshots, each one more damning than the last. But these messages? These are from last week. Last week, while we were planning our wedding, while I was picking out flowers and cakes, he was telling other women he was single. The live stream cut to shaky footage of Andrew's apartment. His fiancée burst through the door, shouting, and the camera captured Andrew's shocked face before his fiancée's hand connected with his cheek in a slap that echoed through the speakers. You're done, she screamed at him. You're done, Andrew. I'm calling my father. I'm calling everyone. And when I'm finished, you won't have a reputation left to destroy. The stream ended abruptly. Dong-wook's phone buzzed again, a different notification. He opened it, his expression hardening. What? Zaraya asked. His car was just repossessed. Liv, in front of his apartment building. He showed her the video, a tow truck, hauling away Andrew's BMW while a crowd watched and filmed. His credit cards were declined at 3 locations in the last hour, and his new employer just released a statement terminating his contract effective immediately. Zaraya should have felt triumphant, should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt a sharp, twisting pain low in her abdomen that made her gasp. "Zaraya?" Dongwook's hands were on her immediately, steadying her. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm fine. Just another contraction, harder this time, made her double over. Not labor. She knew that instinctively, but stress, tension, her body's way of telling her she'd pushed too far. "You're not fine." He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to the sofa. "Breathe. Just breathe. The baby is fine. You're fine. This is just your body reacting to stress." His hand pressed against her belly, feeling for movement. When the baby kicked in response, relief flooded his face. "See? He's okay, but you need to rest." Zaraya tried to nod, tried to focus on breathing, but another notification sound shattered the moment. Dongwook's phone. His expression went from concern to lethal in the space of a heartbeat. "What is it?" she asked, already knowing the answer would change everything. He turned the phone toward her. A traffic camera image showed Andrew's face, pale and desperate, climbing into an Uber. In his hand was an unmistakable red container. "He's heading here," Dongwook said, his voice deadly calm. "And he's armed with gasoline." The security feed showed Andrew stumbling out of the Uber 3 blocks from Dongwook's building, the gas can sloshing in his grip as he weaved through pedestrians. His face was wild, desperate, the face of a man who'd lost everything in the span of 6 hours and had decided to take everyone down with him. "He won't make it past the lobby," Dongwook said, his voice flat as he watched the screen. "My men are already moving into position." Zaraya sat on the sofa, her hand pressed against her belly where the contractions had finally eased, and watched her ex-fiancé's world continue its spectacular collapse. She should have felt afraid, should have been terrified that Andrew was coming here with gasoline and matches and nothing left to lose. Instead, she felt eerily calm. "I want to see him," she said. Dongwook's head snapped toward her. "Absolutely not. He's coming here because of me. Because I destroyed him." She stood slowly, the silk robe pooling around her bare legs. "I need to look him in the eye and let him know it was me. That I'm not the helpless woman he left crying in her car. That I'm the reason his entire life just burned to the ground." "Zaraya, please." She crossed to him, her hand settling on his arm. "I need this, Dongwook. I need him to see what he created when he decided I was nothing." For a long moment, he studied her face, something like pride and concern warring in his expression. Then he pulled out his phone, typed a quick message, and pocketed it again. 5 minutes, he said. "You get 5 minutes with him, in the parking garage, where my men can control the situation. And the moment I think you're in danger, it's over." "Agreed." The elevator ride down felt endless. Dongwook stood beside her, his hand resting at the small of her back, his presence a solid wall of protection and danger. When the doors opened to the underground garage, the temperature dropped, the air thick with concrete dust and gasoline fumes. Andrew was on his knees in the center of the space, surrounded by 4 of Dongwook's men. The gas can lay several feet away, confiscated and harmless. His expensive suit was rumpled, his face blotchy with tears and rage, his wrists zip-tied behind his back. When he saw Zaraya step out of the elevator, his expression twisted into something ugly. "You," he spat. "You did this. You ruined everything." "No, Andrew." Zaraya's voice was steady as she walked toward him, Dongwook a silent shadow at her side. "You did this. You ruined your own life the moment you decided I was disposable." "You stole from me." His voice echoed off the concrete walls. "That was my money, my accounts." "Your money?" She crouched down, bringing herself to his eye level despite Dongwook's warning hand on her shoulder. "You mean the money you made off my business plan? The idea I shared with you over dinner while you pretended to care about my dreams? The startup you repackaged and sold to your friends while I was scraping together rent money?" Andrew's face paled. "That's not." "It is." Zaraya's smile was cold. "And now it's back where it belongs, along with your reputation, your fiancé, your car, and your future. You can't do this to me." His voice broke. "You're nobody. You're nothing. You're just some ghetto." Dongwook moved faster than Zaraya could track, his hand fisting in Andrew's collar, yanking him up to his knees with enough force to make him choke. "Finish that sentence," Dongwook said quietly, his voice lethal, "and I will make you disappear so completely that even dental records won't identify what's left." Andrew's eyes went wide with terror as he finally understood who he was dealing with. You have two choices, Dong-wook continued, releasing him with a shove that sent him sprawling. Choice 1. Zaraya signs a set of documents that will send you to prison for embezzlement, fraud, and assault. You'll serve 20 years minimum, and when you get out, you'll be a registered felon with nothing and no one waiting for you. And choice 2? Andrew's voice shook. Choice 2 is I handle this my way. Dong-wook's smile was terrifying. And my way doesn't involve courts or lawyers or any chance of parole. The silence that followed was suffocating. Zaraya could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Part of her, the dark, wounded part that had been born the night Andrew walked out, wanted to choose option 2. Wanted to watch Dong-wook erase Andrew from existence. But the other part, the part that was still her, the part that remembered who she'd been before all of this, knew what she had to do. Give me the papers, she said. Dong-wook produced a folder from seemingly nowhere, handing it to her along with a pen. The documents inside were already prepared, already notarized, already airtight. Evidence of Andrew's crimes documented with the kind of thoroughness that only someone with Dong-wook's resources could achieve. Zaraya signed her name on every page, each signature a reclamation of power, a rejection of victimhood, a declaration that she would not be destroyed by Andrew Wellington's cruelty. When she finished, she handed the folder back to Dong-wook and turned to Andrew one last time. I'm taking the car back too, she said softly. The BMW you had repossessed? That was mine. I co-signed for it when you couldn't get approved, so I'm reclaiming it along with everything else you stole. Andrew's face crumpled. You can't. I already did. She straightened, her hand instinctively protecting her belly. Goodbye, Andrew. I hope prison teaches you what I learned while you were gone, that survival makes you stronger than cruelty ever could. She turned to walk away, Dong-wook's hand finding hers, steady and grounding. They'd made it 5 steps toward the elevator when Andrew's voice rang out behind them, high and desperate and laced with something that sounded like triumph. You think you've won? He screamed. You think taking me down means anything? Park Dong-wook. You're so focused on protecting her that you don't even see what's happening. Dong-wook stiffened beside her. Shut him up. Kim Sung-min. Andrew's laugh was manic, unhinged. You didn't think I could afford that lawyer on my own, did you? Kim Sung-min is bankrolling everything. He's been watching her for months, watching you fall for her, waiting for the perfect moment to use her against you. The name hit like a physical blow. Zaraya felt Dong-wook's entire body go rigid, his hand tightening around hers almost painfully. He's coming for you, Park, Andrew continued, his voice cracking with hysterical glee. He's been planning this for years, and she's the bait that finally got you to surface. She's the weapon he's been waiting for. So congratulations, you just fell right into his trap. Dong-wook didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge the words. But Zaraya felt the shift in him, the cold calculation replacing the heat, the underground king rising to the surface as he processed the threat. Get him out of my sight, he said to his men, his voice empty of emotion. Process the papers. Make sure he's transferred to a facility that understands he's not to communicate with anyone, ever. As they dragged Andrew away, still screaming threats and revelations, Dong-wook finally looked at Zaraya. His eyes were dark, unreadable, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw something that looked like fear. Who's Kim Sung-min? She whispered. The man who wants me dead, Dong-wook said flatly. And apparently, the man who's been using you to make it happen. The penthouse felt different when they returned. Zaraya couldn't pinpoint exactly what had changed, but something in the air had shifted thicker, heavier, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. Dong-wook moved through the space with predatory awareness, checking windows, testing locks. His phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in rapid Korean to someone whose voice sounded urgent even through the speaker. What's happening? Zaraya asked, though she already knew the answer would terrify her. Kim Sung-min doesn't make idle threats. Dong-wook ended the call, his expression carved from granite. If Andrew knows about him, it means Sung-min wanted him to know. Wanted us to know. This whole thing, the mall, the lawyer, the surveillance footage, it was all orchestrated to bring you here. To me. To make me vulnerable. Then maybe I should leave. Her hand pressed against her belly protectively. Maybe if I'm not here, he'll hunt you down anyway. Dong-wook crossed to her, his hands framing her face with a gentleness that contradicted the violence coiled in his shoulders. You became a target the moment you walked into my office 6 months ago. The moment I looked at you and forgot how to breathe. Sung-min has been watching, waiting for me to care about something more than power. And now he knows. His thumb traced her cheekbone. So you're staying here, where I can protect you, What if you can't? The question came out small, afraid. Then I'll die trying. No hesitation, no doubt, just brutal, absolute certainty. Before Zaraya could respond, Dongwook's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his entire body went rigid. They're here. What? Sung-min's men. They just entered the building. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a section of wall that looked solid and ordinary. His palm pressed against a hidden panel, and the wall slid open, revealing a steel door with a biometric scanner. Inside. Now. Dongwook. This is the Phoenix room. Bulletproof. Soundproof. Stocked with everything you need for 72 hours. He pressed her hand against the scanner, programming her fingerprint into the system. Once you're inside, no one can get to you. Not Sung-min. Not his entire organization. Not even me unless you open it from the inside. Zaraya's pulse hammered. What are you going to do? What I should have done years ago. His eyes met hers, dark and fierce and full of something that looked like goodbye. And this. No. She gripped his shirt, panic clawing up her throat. No. You can't leave me in there while you... I can and I will. He covered her hand with his touch gentle despite the urgency. Because that baby you're carrying deserves a chance to be born. And you deserve a future that doesn't involve running from men like Seung-min for the rest of your life. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, lingering, desperate. Trust me, Zaraya, please. Trust that I know how to survive this. The sound of the elevator chiming made them both freeze. Someone was coming up. Someone who shouldn't have access to this floor. Go, Dongwook said, pushing her toward the Phoenix room. Lock it behind you. Don't open it for anyone but me. And if I don't come back... His voice cracked slightly. If I don't come back, there's a lawyer's card in the top drawer. Call him. He'll make sure you and the baby are taken care of. Dongwook. I love you. The words came out fierce, final. I've loved you since the day you smiled at me like I was worth saving. Remember that. He shoved her inside and slammed the door before she could respond. The lock engaged automatically, the sound of steel bolts sliding into place echoing in the small space. Zaraya pressed her hands against the door, her breath coming in gasps, her mind screaming at her to find a way out, to help him, to do something other than hide while the man she loved faced down a killer. The Phoenix room was exactly as Dongwook had described, windowless, climate-controlled, stocked with water and food and medical supplies. A bank of monitors lined one wall, showing security feeds from throughout the penthouse. Zaraya stumbled toward them, her hands shaking as she found the camera that showed the living room. Dongwook stood in the center of the space, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. 3 men entered through the elevator, moving with coordinated efficiency that spoke of military training. They wore suits but carried themselves like soldiers. And behind them, walking with the confidence of someone who owned everything he surveyed, came Kim Sung-min. He was younger than Zaraya expected. Mid-30s, handsome in a cold, calculated way, with wire-rimmed glasses and a smile that never reached his eyes. Park Dong-wook, he said, his voice carrying through the monitor speakers. It's been a long time. Not long enough. Dong-wook's tone was flat, dangerous. You have 30 seconds to tell me why you're in my home before I forget we used to be friends. Friends. Sung-min laughed, but the sound was hollow. Is that what we were? Because I remember it differently. I remember you taking everything that should have been mine. Territory. Respect. The empire we were supposed to build together. You lost that empire, the moment you decided betrayal was easier than loyalty. And you lost your edge the moment you fell in love with that temp secretary. Seung-min's smile sharpened. Tell me, is she as good as I imagine? Is she worth destroying everything you've built? Dong-wook didn't respond, didn't flinch. But Zaraya saw his hands curl into fists, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. Seung-min circled the room slowly, appraising. I've been planning this for 3 years, watching you, learning your patterns, waiting for the weakness I knew would eventually surface. And then she appeared. Sweet little Zaraya, walking into your office with her smile and her innocence and her complete ignorance of what you really are. He stopped, turning to face Dong-wook directly. So I orchestrated the rest. Her boyfriend's betrayal, the pregnancy, the isolation. I made sure she had nowhere to go except back to you. I made her desperate enough to call for help, knowing you'd come running. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Seung-min hadn't just been watching Zaraya after she left. He'd been manipulating Andrew months before, planting seeds of doubt, financing his new lifestyle, engineering the abandonment. By the time Dong-wook had started his surveillance 6 months ago, the trap had already been set. He'd been watching her drown without realizing someone else had pushed her into the water. Zariah's blood turned to ice. Everything Andrew leaving, the pregnancy struggles, the months of isolation, all of it had been planned, manufactured. She'd been a puppet dancing on strings she'd never seen. Where is she? Sungmin asked casually. Gone. Dong-wook's voice was steady. I sent her away the moment your men entered the building. Liar. Sungmin pulled out a tablet, tapping the screen. I have thermal imaging showing 2 heat signatures on this floor until approximately 3 minutes ago. Then one disappeared. So either you killed her, unlikely, given your pathetic attachment, or you hid her. His eyes lit with understanding. The Phoenix room. Of course. You built a panic room for your precious weakness. He gestured, and his men moved, spreading through the penthouse with purpose. Searching, hunting. Zariah watched, helpless, as they tore through Dong-wook's space. One of them approached the hidden panel, running his hands along the wall, searching for seams. Her breath caught. They were going to find it. They were going to... Dong-wook moved, not toward the men, but toward Sungmin. You want me? Fine. Let's end this. Just us. No weapons. No backup. The way we used to settle things. Sungmin smiled. And if you lose? Then you get everything. My territory. My resources. My life. Dong-wook's eyes were cold. But you leave her alone. You walk away and pretend she doesn't exist. Deal. Zariah screamed against the soundproof door, knowing they couldn't hear her, knowing she was trapped watching the man she loved gamble his life for hers. The monitors showed Dong-wook and Sungmin facing off, circling each other like predators, and then the screens went black. Every single monitor. Every camera. The room plunged into emergency lighting, casting everything in red. Zariah's hands scrambled for the door, for anything that would let her out, but the lock held firm. She couldn't see, couldn't hear, couldn't know if Dong-wook was alive or dying or already dead. Time became meaningless. Seconds or minutes or hours passed in that red-lit darkness, her mind conjuring increasingly horrible scenarios. She sank to the floor, her arms wrapped around her belly, tears streaming down her face as she whispered prayers to deities she'd stopped believing in years ago. Then she saw it. Tucked into a shelf beside the medical supplies was a folder. Thick, official-looking, with her name embossed on the cover. With shaking hands, Zariah opened it. Inside were architectural plans for a building, a community center. With her name on the deed, and beneath that, incorporation papers for a foundation. Second chances. There were budget projections, partnership agreements with local businesses, program outlines for helping women in crisis, childcare, job training, housing assistance, everything she'd ever dreamed of doing if she had the resources. And at the bottom, a handwritten note in Dong-wook's careful script, for when you're ready to save the world the way you saved me. The funds are already transferred. The building is yours. All you have to do is walk through the door and start. I believe in you, Zariah. I've always believed in you. D.W. The date on the note was from 4 months ago, 2 months after she'd left him. He'd been building her a future while she'd been hiding from her past, creating a legacy for her while she'd been convinced she had nothing. A sound broke through her spiral. The locks disengaging. The door opening. Zariah scrambled backward, her heart in her throat, not knowing if it was rescue or execution walking through that door. Dong-wook fell to his knees in the doorway. He was covered in blood, splattered across his face, soaked into his shirt, dripping from his hands. His breathing came hard and ragged, and for a terrifying moment, Zariah thought the blood was his. But there were no wounds, no injuries, just the evidence of whatever had happened beyond that door. Then he looked up, and his eyes met hers, alive, whole, victorious. Sungmin's men are in custody, he said, his voice hoarse. Security footage shows they attacked first. Self-defense, legal, clean. He swallowed hard. It's over. Is the baby okay? He asked, his voice wrecked. 6 months later, Zariah stood in front of the floor-length mirror in what had become their bedroom, adjusting the red silk dress that hugged her post-pregnancy curves. The fabric whispered against her brown skin, elegant and powerful, the kind of dress that made statements without saying a word. Her natural hair was styled in elegant twists that cascaded down her back, and for the first time in over a year, she looked at her reflection and recognized the woman staring back. Strong, whole, unbroken. You're going to steal the show, Dong-wook said from the doorway, and when she turned, her breath caught. He wore a black suit tailored to perfection, his dark hair pushed back, his eyes warm as they traveled over her. But it was what he held in his arms that made her heart squeeze. Their son, 3 months old, dressed in a tiny suit that matched his father's, his chubby fingers wrapped around Dong-wook's thumb. Andrew's blood ran through the baby's veins, but Dong-wook's name was on the birth certificate, and that was the only paternity that mattered. "We're going to steal the show," she corrected, crossing to them and pressing a kiss to her baby's forehead. Minjun, they'd named him after Dong-wook's late brother, a gesture that had made the underground king cry for the first time in Zariah's presence. All 3 of us. The Second Chances Foundation opening was everything Zariah had dreamed and more. The building stood in the heart of Seoul's struggling district, renovated but not gentrified, welcoming but not condescending. Women filed in throughout the evening, some with children, some alone, all carrying stories of survival that mirrored her own. The child care center was already full. The job training program had a waiting list. The emergency housing had placed 12 families in the first month alone. Zariah moved through the crowd with Minjun in her arms, accepting congratulations and gratitude with grace. But her eyes kept finding Dong-wook across the room. He stood with a group of businessmen who couldn't know that the polite, charming man discussing investment opportunities was the same person who dismantled Kim Sung-min's empire with ruthless efficiency 3 months ago. No bodies, no violence, just strategic financial destruction and carefully leaked information that had sent Sung-min fleeing to a country with no extradition treaty, his reputation destroyed, his organization scattered to the winds, clean, decisive, permanent. "Mrs. Park?" A young woman approached, shy and grateful. "I just wanted to thank you. I was living in my car with my daughter 2 weeks ago. Now we have an apartment and I start job training on Monday. You saved our lives." Zariah's throat tightened. "You saved your own life by walking through that door. I just made sure the door was open." As the evening wound down and guests filtered out, Zariah found herself on the building's rooftop balcony, Minjun asleep against her shoulder, watching Seoul's lights flicker like earthbound stars. Dong-wook joined her, his arms sliding around her waist, pulling her against his side. "You did it," he murmured into her hair. "You built something that's going to change lives for generations." "We did it," she corrected. "None of this happens without you. I just provided the resources. You provided the vision." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You provided everything that matters." His phone buzzed, once, twice. The familiar pattern that meant something required his attention. But instead of tensing, instead of pulling away to handle whatever crisis demanded his focus, Dong-wook simply pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. A text from an unknown number. "Wrong number. Sorry. Meant to text someone else about a situation I can't handle alone." Zariah's eyebrows rose. "Are you going to answer?" Dong-wook's smile was dangerous and amused. "Should I?" She thought about it. Thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, desperate and alone, sending a text to a number she'd promised never to use. Thought about how that one moment of vulnerability had led to this, to a foundation that would help thousands, to a son sleeping peacefully in her arms, to a love that had rewritten every rule she thought she understood. "Yes," she said softly. "Answer it." Dong-wook typed quickly. "You have the right number. Tell me where you are." The response came immediately. "How do you know I need help?" "Because people don't text wrong numbers when they're fine. They text wrong numbers when they're desperate enough to reach for anything that might save them. So tell me where you are, and I'll send someone." A pause. Then, "Gangnam Mall. By the south entrance. There's a man following me and I don't know what to do." Dong-wook's expression shifted, the underground king rising to the surface as he made a call, speaking in rapid Korean. Within seconds, he dispatched someone to the location. When he ended the call, he looked at Zariah with something like wonder. "You're going to make me soft," he said. "No." She shifted Minjun in her arms, reaching up to cup Dong-wook's face. "I'm going to make you human. There's a difference." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Every time I think I can't love you more, you prove me wrong." "Good." Her smile was wicked. "I plan to keep proving you wrong for the next 50 years. Seoul stretched out below them, a city of millions, each light representing a life, a story, a person who might one day need help they were too afraid to ask for." Zariah thought about Andrew, rotting in a high-security prison where he spent his days scrubbing floors and his nights remembering everything he'd lost. She thought about Kim Sung-min, hiding in whatever hole he'd crawled into, knowing that one wrong move would bring Dong-wook's wrath down on him again. She thought about the woman at Gangnam Mall, scared and alone, who'd just been given a lifeline by a wrong number that wasn't wrong at all. Let the world try to call us again, Dong-wook said, echoing her thoughts as he pulled her closer, careful of their sleeping son. I'm always waiting. He kissed her then, soft and deep, and full of promises that tasted like forever. And Zariah kissed him back, knowing that this love built on darkness and light, on survival and salvation, on two broken people who'd decided to be whole together was the greatest revenge she could ever take. Not against Andrew. Not against the world that had tried to break her, but against every voice that had ever told her she wasn't worth saving. If you loved this story of vengeance and devotion, subscribe now to Ruthless Romance Tales, because in this world of underground kings and second chances, you don't want to be the one who misses the next call. Trust me, honey, the next story is already waiting, and it's going to wreck you in the best possible way. Hit that subscribe button, smash that notification bell, and welcome to a world where love doesn't save you, it transforms you. See you in the next tale.